Hi everybody, Dana Sparks, broker of Maximum One Greater Atlanta Realtors, and today's contract tip, in continuing on with the changes that the Georgia Association of Realtors, or GAR, made to the 2022 contract forms, we are going to talk about the changes they made to the residential lease. That is GAR form F913 residential lease. And just a couple changes, but let's go over them. So the first change that GAR made to the residential lease has to do with an early termination by the landlord. So in paragraph A13 and the further explanation in corresponding paragraph B13, that's where the changes were made. So in A13 is the fill in the blanks, and it states the landlord shall or shall not have the right to terminate the lease early. If the landlord does have the right to terminate the lease early, the landlord shall give blank days notice. So you negotiate the number of days notice of such termination, at which time the tenant shall be obligated to vacate the premises. After the tenant has vacated the premises, the landlord shall credit the tenant with the sum of fill in the blank for the amount of dollars as an early termination fee to the tenant, which shall be first applied against any monies owing the tenant to the landlord, with the balance thereafter being paid by the tenant. So basically, landlord and tenant negotiate the early termination rights for the landlord, the number of days notice, and the fee that the landlord is going to pay the tenant if they vacate. If they don't vacate, then there's eviction and costs associated with that. So if they vacate, the landlord shall pay the tenant this early termination fee after they take out fees for anything that would be further on in the lease regarding damage to the property, so forth and so on. So those are the items that you negotiate in paragraph A, and in paragraph 13, the corresponding paragraph, it goes on to basically spell out the rights that if the landlord has the right to terminate the lease early. So there's further explanation about that. Then another thing that they have added in the lease has to do with denial of access. If the tenant denies the landlord right to access. So in the first paragraph A, it's in paragraph A22, and there is a denial of access charge. Tenant agrees to pay X amount of dollars for each incident where the tenant denies the landlord access to the premises, as described elsewhere herein. Then, if you go to the corresponding further explanation paragraph B22, it goes on to state that if the wrong section. If denial of access, right to access, and signage. It goes on, and part of this has already been in there, that if negotiated, the tenant gives the landlord the right to access the property, put sign on the property. This is, for example, let's say a landlord has a property where they have it leased out and they're going to sell it. So that's one instance where there would be definitely signage and right to access. But what they have added, the sentences, the parts that they have added to this for 2022, in the corresponding paragraph B22C, it goes on to state, for each occasion where the access rights described above are denied, tenant shall pay the landlord the denial access fee as liquidated damages in the amount set forth elsewhere herein, which is paragraph A. Visitors may take photos and capture video of premises to help them remember the specifics of that property. That's another thing that they added. And again, that's in the instance where an owner has a property with a lease in it, with tenants in it, and they're going to put it up for sale. And then the other change is a universal change that GAR made in their notices section, that for electronic notice, delivery of notice is deemed received when the sender can prove they sent it, even if it's not open. And we've discussed that in previous videos. So not a whole lot of changes. This one is definitely short and sweet. Not a whole lot of changes to the residential lease, but definitely some important changes for landlords and tenants regarding early termination rights, fees for that, and so forth and so on. So take a look at that if you are working with the public on a residential lease, whether it be from the landlord side or from the tenant side. Also, just so you know, there is a whole other body of law that does kick in, and it is the Georgia landlord tenant laws. And if you go to Google, you can Google the Georgia landlord tenant or tenant landlord handbook for the latest version. And that, if you are an agent, point of practice is to make sure to get that into the hands of whichever side of the deal you're working with, whether it be your landlord or your tenant. Please watch the other videos we've done on the changes to the 2022 GAR contract package. And short and sweet today. Thank you guys so much for watching. Dana Sparks, broker of Maximum One Greater Atlanta Realtors, satisfying your needs with service, innovation, and education.